He was called a disgrace, a failure, a boy who spoke late, who couldn't fit in school, and who was told by his teacher, "You will never succeed." But that boy didn't stop. That boy didn't give up. And one day, that same boy would unlock the secrets of the universe. He would become the most famous scientist in the world. His name, Albert Einstein. Hello, my amazing friends. Welcome to Learn English with Stories. 365, the place where dreams grow, and your English gets stronger with every story. Today's journey is one of struggle, rejection, and quiet brilliance. It's about a boy who saw the world differently. While others memorized facts, he asked questions. While others gave up, he stayed curious. This story is not just about science or success. It's about courage. It's about the power of thinking deeply and dreaming big, even when the world says you can't. And yes, it's also a perfect story for English learners. As we go through Einstein's life, you will learn useful English phrases, simple vocabulary, and beautiful expressions. You'll also practice listening and speaking, and build your confidence step by step. So grab your notebook, sit back, and open your heart. Because the story of Albert Einstein is not just a lesson in history, it's a lesson in life. And it begins right now. Let's go. Part 1. A quiet boy with a big head. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in a small town called Ulm in Germany. His parents were not famous or rich. His father, Hermann Einstein, sold electrical equipment. His mother, Pauline Koch, was a homemaker who loved music and learning. They were simple people with simple lives. But the child they held in their arms would one day change the world. When Albert was born, something about him seemed unusual. His head was very large, so large that his family got worried. They even joked, "Will this boy grow up to be normal?" But no one could imagine that this baby with the big head and the quiet eyes would become the most brilliant thinker of the century. Albert was different from the beginning. He didn't speak at the usual age. While most children said their first words around 1 year old, Albert said almost nothing until he was 3. His parents were afraid something was wrong. His doctors were not sure what to say. Even when he did start speaking, he didn't speak much. He was so quiet that the family gave him a nickname, the Quiet One. But Albert wasn't silent because he was slow. He was silent because he was thinking. He would sit alone for hours, watching the world around him. He watched sunlight come through the window. He watched dust dance in the air. He listened to the ticking of the clock. While other children laughed and played loudly, Albert watched, listened, and imagined. At age 5, something happened that changed his life forever. One day his father gave him a small gift. It was a compass, just a small, simple compass. But for Albert, it was magic. He held the compass in his hand and turned it. The needle always pointed north. No matter which way he turned it, it pointed in the same direction. He was confused. He was amazed. He asked, why? How? What force was moving that needle? That small compass opened a big door in his mind. It showed him that there were invisible powers in the world, powers you couldn't see or touch, powers that followed rules. And Albert wanted to understand those rules. He later said, "That compass made a deep and lasting impression on me. It was the beginning of his love for science, for mystery, and for discovery." At home, Albert spent a lot of time alone. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't loud, but he was always thinking, always asking questions. He once asked his mother, "Why does light move?" She didn't know the answer, but she smiled and said, "That's a good question, Albert. Keep asking." And he did. Albert kept asking, kept wondering, kept dreaming. While other children saw a toy, Albert saw a puzzle. While others saw a compass, Albert saw the universe. This was only the beginning. The quiet boy with the big head had just started his journey. A journey that would lead him from silence to greatness, from questions to answers, from disgrace to genius. Part 2. The School That Failed Einstein. Albert Einstein was curious. He loved asking questions. He loved solving problems in his mind. But when he went to school, everything changed. School did not feel like a place of learning. It felt like a prison. At that time, schools in Germany were very strict. Teachers were not friendly. They didn't like questions. They wanted children to memorize facts, repeat rules, and sit still. That was the rule. And Albert hated it. He sat in class feeling bored and trapped. He didn't enjoy memorizing long texts. He didn't like following orders without understanding the reason. He wanted to explore, to imagine, to think for himself. But his teachers didn't understand that. One teacher even shouted at him and said, "You are a disgrace to the school. You will never be successful." Those words hurt. Can you imagine being just a boy full of dreams, and hearing that from your teacher? Albert went home that day and cried, but inside, something powerful began to grow. A quiet fire. A voice that said, "I will prove them wrong." Even though school was painful, Albert found comfort in one subject, mathematics. He called it the language of the universe. Math made sense to him. It had patterns. It had logic. It felt beautiful. While others feared numbers, Albert loved them. He said, "When I do math, I feel peace in my mind." At home, Albert had a few people who believed in him. His mother, Pauline, noticed how much he loved music. She encouraged him to learn the violin. At first he didn't like practicing, but slowly music became his way to relax. It helped him think. Sometimes he would play music and then go back to solving math problems. It was like music helped him open his mind. His uncle Jacob was another important person. Jacob was an engineer and he loved math too, but he didn't teach Albert like the school teachers. He made learning fun. He said, "Albert, math is like a treasure hunt. Every problem is a clue. And you, my boy, are the detective." Albert smiled. He started to enjoy math even more. He would sit for hours working through puzzles, solving equations, chasing the treasure. Still, life wasn't easy. Albert didn't fit in with the other children. While they played games, he read books. While they laughed loudly, he thought quietly. He didn't like sports. He didn't like small talk. He felt like an outsider, but he didn't mind. He had something special, his imagination. He once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge," and he meant it. In his free time, he would imagine strange things. He would ask himself, what would it feel like to ride on a beam of light? This question would stay with him for many years. Albert was not a perfect student. He was not the top of the class, but he was something much greater. A thinker, a dreamer, a boy who refused to stop asking questions, and that made him dangerous in a world that wanted silence. But Albert would not stay silent for long. His mind was just beginning to shine. Part 3. A Rebel Mind and a New Path. As Albert grew older, the pressure from school became heavier. Teachers still didn't like his attitude. He questioned everything. He didn't accept rules blindly. And in those days, that was a problem. One headmaster even told his parents, "It would be better if your son left the school." Albert was shocked. He was not a troublemaker. He just wanted to understand, not obey without reason. But he had no choice. He left school at age 15 without a diploma. At home, things were also difficult. His father's business was failing. Money was tight. The family had to move from Germany to Italy to find better opportunities. Albert stayed behind in Munich for a short time to finish school, but he couldn't take it anymore. The stress, the pressure, the rules. It was too much. One night, he packed his bags and left. He traveled by train across the Alps to join his family in Italy. He didn't tell his school. He didn't ask permission. He just left. That was the moment Albert stopped following paths made by others. He began to make his own, but Albert knew he needed to complete his education. He couldn't give up completely, so he decided to apply to a university in Switzerland, one that focused on science and engineering. It was called the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. He was only 16 years old when he applied. He took the entrance exam. He failed. Yes, even Einstein failed. He passed the math and science parts with flying colors, but he failed the language and general knowledge sections. The university told him to study for one more year and try again. And he did. He went to a special school in a small town called Aarau. There, things were different. The teachers were kind. They encouraged thinking and creativity. It was the first time Albert felt like he belonged. In Aarau, he lived with a local family. He studied hard. He learned the language better. And most of all, he kept asking questions. He also had a strange thought that returned to him often. What would happen if I could travel at the speed of light? That question kept spinning in his mind like a wheel. He couldn't stop thinking about it. After a year in Aarau, Albert applied to the Polytechnic again. This time he passed. He was accepted, and in 1896 he started his university life. He was finally in a place where ideas mattered more than rules. But even in college, Albert didn't exactly follow the rules. He didn't attend every class. He sometimes annoyed his professors. One of them even said, "Einstein does not show proper respect for authority." But Albert didn't care about authority. He cared about truth. He read extra books. He studied the works of famous scientists like Maxwell and Newton. He also made a few close friends. They would sit together, drink tea, and talk about science, life, and the mysteries of the universe. However, when Albert graduated, he couldn't find a job. No university wanted to hire him. Many professors still thought he was lazy, difficult, or too independent. He applied to many places. He waited for months. Nothing happened. No one believed in him. Finally, with the help of a friend's father, he got a job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. It was not a fancy job. He had to read technical documents and decide if new inventions were original, but Albert didn't mind. The job was simple, and it gave him something precious time to think. In that quiet office between papers and diagrams, Albert began to write down his thoughts. He started working on new theories in his spare time. The boy who had once been called a disgrace, a failure, a rebel, was now preparing to change the world, and the world didn't even know it yet. Part 4. The Miracle Year That Changed Everything. Albert Einstein sat at his small desk in the Swiss Patent Office. Around him were stacks of papers, technical drawings, and invention requests. It wasn't the kind of place where you'd expect a genius to be working. But that quiet office became the birthplace of a revolution in science. While other people saw boring machines and legal documents, Albert saw something else: time, space, energy, and the universe waiting to be understood. In 1905, something incredible happened. That year, Albert was just 26 years old. He had no PhD, no university job, and no lab. But in the middle of his ordinary job, he did something extraordinary. He wrote and published not one, not two, but 4 scientific papers. These 4 papers would change the world forever. Scientists later called it Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, which means miracle year. The first paper was about a strange idea called the photoelectric effect. Albert explained how light could behave like tiny particles, not just waves. This idea helped lay the foundation for what we now call quantum physics. At that time, many scientists didn't agree. But Albert didn't care. He believed in the truth of his ideas. The second paper explained how tiny particles move in a liquid. It helped prove that atoms actually exist, something people still debated in those days. Imagine that before Einstein, not everyone believed in atoms. His paper gave strong evidence that the invisible world was real and could be measured. The third paper was the beginning of something huge. It was called the Special Theory of Relativity. It introduced a radical idea. Time is not the same for everyone. It can move faster or slower, depending on how fast you are moving. Albert said, "Time and space are not fixed. They depend on the observer." This was something the world had never heard before. It shocked scientists. It fascinated thinkers, and it made Albert famous in the scientific world. But the fourth paper was the most famous of all. In just one short formula, he changed everything. That formula was E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. This simple-looking equation had a powerful meaning. Mass can turn into energy, and energy can become mass. It explained how the sun shines. It explained how stars explode. It even became the basis for nuclear power and later nuclear weapons. All from one idea, all from one mind. In just 1 year, Albert Einstein went from an unknown office worker to one of the most important scientists in the world. And he did it without a university job, without a big research team, and without fame. He did it with pure thought, imagination, and unstoppable curiosity. Still, fame did not come immediately. Many scientists were slow to accept his ideas. Years passed before the world truly recognized what he had done. But Albert didn't stop. He kept working. He kept thinking. He kept following the questions that no one else dared to ask. He once said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." But we know that wasn't true. Albert had more than curiosity. He had courage. He had vision. He had the strength to follow his mind when others doubted him. That small boy who was once told he would never succeed had now written the laws of the universe. That quiet thinker who sat alone in classrooms now stood at the center of modern science. And still, this was only the beginning. Albert Einstein had changed everything. But the world had more questions, and Albert was ready to find the answers. Part 5. Fame, Resistance, and the Fight for Peace. After the miracle year of 1905, Albert Einstein's life began to change. Scientists slowly started to notice his work. At first, only a few people understood what he had written. His ideas were complex, strange, and completely different from the old ways of thinking. But slowly, more and more scientists began to realize the truth. Einstein was not just smart. He was a genius. A mind ahead of his time. By 1909, he was offered a job as a professor at the University of Zurich. It was his first real academic position. Finally, the boy who had once been rejected by teachers was now teaching others. He moved from city to city, Prague, Berlin, and beyond, giving lectures, writing papers, and continuing to develop his theories. In 1915, he completed what many call his greatest work, the general theory of relativity. It was even more powerful than the special theory. This time Albert explained how gravity actually works. He said that massive objects like the sun or planets bend space and time around them. He described it like putting a heavy ball on a soft blanket. The ball makes a curve and smaller objects roll toward it. That's gravity. That's the secret of how the universe moves. But people didn't believe it until something incredible happened. In 1919, scientists observed a solar eclipse. They measured the position of stars near the sun and saw that the light had bent just as Einstein predicted. The news spread like wildfire. The newspapers said, "A new theory of the universe," and Einstein beats. Newton overnight. Albert became world famous. He didn't enjoy fame. He still preferred simple clothes, quiet rooms, and deep thinking. But he used his fame for a purpose. He began to speak out, not just about science, but about peace, justice, and human rights. Einstein had lived through war, and he hated it. He saw how science was used to build weapons, not just knowledge. He said peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. When World War I broke out, he refused to support it. He stood alone even when many of his fellow scientists supported the war. In the 1930s, danger rose again. Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany. Einstein was Jewish, and he knew he could not stay. Nazis hated his ideas. They called his work Jewish science. They even put a price on his head. Albert fled Germany and moved to the United States. He started a new life at Princeton University. There he continued his research and wrote letters, essays, and speeches to promote peace. He helped Jewish refugees escape from Europe. He warned the world about hatred and racism, but even in America, the world was changing. In 1939, World War II was beginning. Scientists warned that Nazi Germany might build a terrible new weapon, an atomic bomb. Einstein, afraid of what could happen, signed a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt. The letter urged the U.S. to start its own research just in case. Later, the bomb was built and used on Japan. Einstein was heartbroken. He had not worked on the bomb himself, but he felt responsible. He said, "If I had known, I would have become a watchmaker." He spent the rest of his life speaking out against nuclear weapons. He said the world must choose between peace or destruction. Albert Einstein was no longer just a scientist. He was a voice for peace, a fighter for truth, and a symbol of moral courage. He believed that science must serve humanity, not destroy it. He believed that curiosity was powerful, but kindness was greater. And as the years passed, people didn't just remember his theories. They remembered his heart. They remembered the boy who once sat alone asking questions no one else dared to ask. The boy who became a light in a dark world. Part 6. The Legacy of a Curious Heart. In the final years of his life, Albert Einstein was no longer just a scientist. He had become a legend. His name was known around the world. His face, with the wild white hair and kind eyes, appeared in newspapers, books, and even children's cartoons. People didn't always understand his theories, but they respected his wisdom. He was not just the man who explained time and space. He was the man who stood for peace, truth, and human dignity. Albert continued to live a simple life. He wore old sweaters, hated socks, and often played the violin in the evenings. He walked slowly, thought deeply, and spoke with honesty. He once said, "Try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value." And that is exactly what he did. At Princeton University, students often saw him walking with a notebook in his hand. He was still asking questions, still thinking about the universe. Even in his 70s, he worked on new theories about gravity and light. He never stopped learning. He believed that curiosity had no age limit. But Einstein also knew his time was running out. In 1955, at the age of 76, he became ill. Doctors offered surgery, but he refused. He said, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go." On April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away. His brain was preserved for study. His body was cremated. His ashes were scattered, just as he wished. No grand tomb, no golden statue, just peace. The world mourned. People everywhere remembered his words, his smile, his ideas. But Einstein had always said, "I have no special gift. I am only passionately curious." He wanted others to understand that greatness is not born. It is built through questions, courage, and kindness. Today his legacy lives on. In science, his theories are still used in GPS technology, space travel, and nuclear energy. In classrooms, students still study E equals mc squared. In hearts, he is remembered as a man who used his mind to help the world not hurt it. Einstein taught us that failure is not the end, that being different is not a weakness, that asking why is the beginning of every great idea. He showed us that knowledge without compassion is empty, and that true genius comes not from power, but from purpose. So remember, my amazing friends, Albert Einstein was once a quiet child, a misunderstood student, a rejected thinker, but he believed in his questions. He believed in himself. And because of that, he changed the world. And you have that same power. You have a mind that can grow, a heart that can guide, and a dream that can shine. Never stop learning. Never stop asking, because just like Einstein, your light might be the one that helps others see. Part 7. Lessons from Einstein. For you and me. Albert Einstein's story is not just history. It is a message. A message to every child who feels different, to every student who is told they are not smart enough, to every dreamer who feels out of place. It is a message to you, my amazing friend, and to me, because behind the science, behind the big theories and famous name Einstein, was just a human being, a person who struggled, who felt pain, who was misunderstood, but he never gave up. And that is what makes his story powerful. Einstein's life shows us that success doesn't start with being perfect. It starts with being curious. He was not the best student. He was not always polite. He didn't follow the rules, but he asked questions that no one else dared to ask. While the world was busy with tradition and fear, he was busy wondering why the sky is blue, wondering how light moves, wondering what lies beyond what we see. That curiosity became his superpower. He also taught us that imagination is not just for children. Einstein once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, but imagination circles the world." He imagined riding a beam of light. He imagined space bending like a soft blanket. He imagined peace in a world full of war. And those dreams became reality. That is the magic of belief. But perhaps the most important lesson from Einstein's life is about kindness. He won the Nobel Prize. He became world famous. He could have lived in a palace spoken only to kings and scholars, but he didn't. He answered letters from children. He gave money to students. He spoke up for the poor, the oppressed, and the forgotten. He believed that intelligence means nothing without humanity. Einstein once said, "Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile." That is the heart of his legacy. He used his mind to serve the world, not to make money, not to gain power, but to help, to heal, to teach. He also reminded us that failure is not something to fear. Do you remember? He was rejected by schools, told he would never succeed, denied jobs, ignored by experts. But he kept going. He said, "A person who never made a mistake never tried anything new." His failures were not the end. They were steps toward something greater. Even in his later years, Albert stayed humble. He laughed at his fame. When people asked him deep questions, he sometimes replied, "I don't know. I'm still learning." That's right. Einstein, the greatest mind of the 20th century, still saw himself as a student. And that is true greatness. Now, my friend, I ask you, what can you take from this story? Maybe you feel behind in school. Maybe you don't speak perfect English. Maybe people doubt you. Maybe you doubt yourself. But remember, this Albert Einstein was once a quiet boy who spoke late and failed many times. But he had a question, a dream, a fire inside. And so do you. This story is your English practice. Yes, it helps you learn new words, build confidence, and improve your listening. But it's more than that. It's a reminder that you matter, that your voice matters, that your questions are powerful. So today, as you close this story, don't close your heart. Keep asking, keep learning, keep dreaming. Because, who knows, the next great idea, the next great discovery, the next great change might come from you. And we, your Learn English with Stories 365 family, will be here every step of the way to learn to grow and to believe together. Part 8. Your Turn to Shine. Albert Einstein is no longer with us, but his story, his words, and his spirit continue to live on. Every time we look at the stars, every time we use GPS, every time we ask a deep question, we are following the path he helped create. His life was not easy. It was filled with doubt, rejection, loneliness, and struggle. But he kept going. Why? Because he believed in something bigger, truth, peace, and the beauty of understanding. He once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning." That's a message for you. Maybe you are learning English and making mistakes. Maybe you are afraid to speak. Maybe you feel like others are smarter or better. But remember, even Einstein was told he would never succeed. Even he felt lost. What made him special wasn't that he knew everything. It was that he never stopped learning. You can do the same. Whether you are 12 or 60, it's never too late to grow. Whether you speak slowly or fluently, your words matter. Whether you have failed once or 10 times, your story isn't over. Learning English is not just about grammar or vocabulary. It's about expressing your dreams, your ideas, your voice. And just like Einstein's voice changed the world, so can yours. So what now, my amazing friend Will? You give up, or will you keep going? Will you stay silent, or will you speak? Let this story be your reminder. You are not a failure. You are not behind. You are becoming step by step, word by word, mistake by mistake. That is how we learn. That is how we grow. Einstein's story is over, but yours is just beginning. Now, I ask you, what is the one dream you refuse to give up on? Share it in the comments and let your voice be heard. Because this is not just a story. This is your story too. And we at Learn English with Stories 365 are here for you every single day. Keep shining, keep learning, and never stop believing. Conclusion and reflection. Albert Einstein was not born a genius. He was not the best student. He was not the teacher's favorite. He was the quiet boy, the outsider, the one who didn't fit in. But he kept asking. He kept learning. He kept dreaming. And in the end, he became the most brilliant scientist of the century. His story teaches us something powerful. Greatness does not come from being perfect. It comes from being curious, brave, and true to yourself. My amazing friends, you are learning English. That alone is brave. It takes courage to learn a new language, to make mistakes, to try again. But look at Einstein. He failed many times. He was rejected, ignored, misunderstood. Yet, he never stopped. Why? Because he believed in his questions. He believed in learning. And that belief changed the world. So if you ever feel lost, if you ever feel like giving up, remember Einstein. Remember his journey. And remember this, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep going. This story was not only for your English listening practice, it was for your heart. It was to show you that your voice matters, your story matters, and your learning journey is worth it. Now tell me in the comments, what was the most powerful part of Einstein's story for you? What did you learn from it? And as always, thank you for being here with Learn English with Stories 365. Keep learning, keep believing, your time will come.